You're winning. You're winning. You're winning. I was on mute, guys. Sorry about that. But welcome to another episode of Epic Understanding. I am your host, Coach Love. I'm very excited about the guest that I have here tonight. And I must say, she is a guest like no other. The mix of her talents and vision is quite enticing. So, without further ado, let me introduce you to, or reintroduce you to, Miss Julia Gordon-Bramer. Hello, how are you?
Hi, Erica. Or do you prefer Coach? Which do you?
You know what? I actually, if I could just get people to call me Love.
Love. Okay. Oh, I can call you Love.
That would make me very excited. I would take that. There's a couple of people that have begun to call me Miss Love, and I take that too. But whatever you desire is just fine with me. So as I have, started to unpack your work and get to know you, all I get is another question and another question, one after the other.
Sure.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so, I'm a complicated person. Yeah.
Maybe interesting. You're interesting, you're compelling, you're deep. You are God's great workmanship.
Oh, well, thank you. I think we all are,
Yes, absolutely, absolutely. So let's just start right off with this idea. I know that you both read tarot cards, and you're also a God-fearing person, correct?
Yeah, so I mean, right off, I'll say I don't use that expression God-fearing. I would say I'm a God-loving person.
Okay, a God-loving person.
Yeah, my belief, and it may be a little contradictory to the fundamentalist Christian vision, but I believe that we're all connected just by being alive, and I call that life force God. So so we all have it in us. We all have a piece of it, and it's whether we want to pay attention to it or not. So, I believe in oneness, and that's all the God within all of us. And it's kind of, do we want to wake up to that or not? Do we want to live through the light and the positivity? Or do we just want to, identify as these sacks of flesh moving around, to me, life is just so much more complex than that.
I see. When in one of our previous conversations, you talked about scripture that gave you, comfort in that you're not practicing anything of darkness.
Right. So I mean, I was raised in the Episcopal Church, so I do have that Christian background, and it's very much a part of me. And I was always a spiritual kid. I did my Bible study. I've read the whole Bible, and I can answer all the Bible questions on Jeopardy. It's just a part of me. And as I've gotten older, I've learned to process the Bible differently and really get lessons that maybe I didn't in my younger church-going days. And some people might argue, we talked about in your last podcast that I did with you, we talked about one of those lessons, the one where Jesus drove the demons into the herd of swine. And I explained to you why I didn't believe that was a literal story, but a metaphor. And I won't repeat myself on that because anyone could just watch that podcast. But that's an example of, the Bible stories mean a lot to me. And I think that they're brilliant parables, and there's so much wisdom in the same way that there's wisdom in the teachings of the Buddha. And I'm sure lots of other religions, but the Christian tradition speaks to me because I know it better, you know.
I see. I see.
Yeah.
Okay. And so my next question for you is, how did you come into this? And have you always had the ability to connect in spirit?
I would say yes, I have always had the ability. Again, I think everybody does. And I
Okay.
think it's teaching yourself to pay attention. But I knew I was sort of a weird teenager.
Okay.
And around the time I was 16, which was the age that I got my first deck of tarot cards,
Okay.
I also began to have some premonitions, and they were very random. And I've written about it. I have a book forthcoming, and I talk about my spiritual journey in my book, which is the working title is The Tarot Diaries, but I'm not sure what the official title will be. But that will be out next year with Inner Traditions Publishing. And I talk about, my first premonitions. Specifically, I was 16. I was driving down the road with taking my little sister to the mall, and I had a vision. You could call it a daydream
Mm.
of a big crow on the side of the road with a broken wing. And I thought, why did I think of that? And then about 5 minutes later, I saw exactly what I had thought of. And that was my first official premonition. And what did it mean? I don't know. I think it was the muscles starting to flex.
Okay.
And some of those early premonitions for a lot of people seem to be very random. In fact, the person I'll be speaking about tonight, Sylvia Plath, she wrote a lot about her premonitions being very random and not something she could always control. Not, she wished she were better at it. But yeah, so these things began to happen on a more conscious level in my teens. But I was always kind of a magical kid, and I always had
Ah.
pockets of stones and bones I would find in the creek, and herbs, and that sort of thing. And I read a lot, and yeah, and just the spirit world.
Are we frozen because of me? Or are we frozen or is Julia frozen? Family, do me a favor. And if you can hear me, can
Oh,
you hear me?
you disappeared for a short bit there. I don't.
Oh, okay. Okay. Well, I apologize. I apologize. I was saying, if you can hear me, because you were frozen on my side, so I couldn't tell whether it was me or whether it was
Yeah,
you. But I apologize, everyone. Sometimes these things happen, but continue.
yeah. Oh, yeah. I think I pretty much said it. So, ever since I was a kid, it was certainly a part of me. And I've always had spiritual study, beyond the tarot, reading about things like the Tao. I'm a practitioner of something called A Course in Miracles, which I teach a course in that. Read a lot about Buddha and Buddhism, which is very close to A Course in Miracles. And it all works in harmony. And what I love so much, and even when I used to teach humanities at Lindenwood University, I used to especially love the religious cultural connections, because truth is truth is truth is truth, and we have different brands of it and different packages of it. But
Okay.
almost everything says we're one. Almost everything says it's love and light, and the source. And so whatever you want to name God, there's just this core of spirituality that runs through humanity that gives us a greater purpose than just this existence. So, and that's what I'm about. I'm about experiencing that. And especially in these dark times today, I want to be love and light. I want to find the ways to connect with people during so much division. I want to feel my way into compassion and empathy, even if it's a very tough person to do that with, or a political figure or whatever. I am not going to be pulled into the darkness and the hate.
Mm. Speaking of the darkness and hate, you told me the other day that we are in a transitional time and that this was, I
Yeah,
don't
the
know.
tower card phase, I think I explained
Yeah,
it at.
yeah, that this
Mhm.
was basically foretold. How is this so? Tell me about that.
Well, that gets into a little bit of astrology, and I'm not an astrologer.
Okay.
But what I will say is we have our eras, and we just ended the era of Pisces, and we're moving into the age of Aquarius, just like the song from the Broadway play Hair that, this is the dawning of the. I once. Are you there? My
I'm
my
here.
singing my singing must have knocked me
No.
offline.
Oh my gosh.
I
Oh
won't
my
sing
gosh.
anymore, I promise.
No, wait, you know what? You're always welcome to sing with me. This is the
No, no, no.
program I've been known to break out in song for sure.
I got a notice I had an unstable connection, and I don't know what to do about that.
Um,
So that's
well,
probably this. But anyway, hopefully we'll just sail through that, and maybe that'll be the end of it. So we have a transition time from one era to the next. So we
okay.
move from Pisces into the age of Aquarius, but this transition is like a 30, some people believe 33-year overlap,
Okay.
fade in. It's not a clean from hell to heaven. There's some troublesome times where things are changing in a big way, and oh boy, are they. Our social
Yeah,
systems are crumbling.
that's right. That's right. Hello. Up. I think she's frozen again, and I'm not sure if it's her, if it's me. Guys, could you help me out and let me
Okay.
know that? Okay,
I'm
you're
back
back.
now. I'm back now. I'm so sorry. I don't know what to do about this.
That's okay. You
Um,
know what? We're just going to keep pushing through. It's
okay,
fine. It's
okay.
fine.
But yeah, so our systems are crumbling, and that's why I pulled out the Tower tarot card, because when I read that, it says our foundation is wrong. The building has to come down. It's time to rebuild. So
Mhm.
whether we're looking at politics, society, social problems, climate problems, economic problems, all of the systems are crumbling right now, and it is a time for rebuilding. And I would like to hold in my mind that this is going to be a beautiful future, instead of getting really freaked out, as so many people are, by worst case scenario.
Mm. And you said something else that this is the age of the woman.
The age of Aquarius is the age of the
Okay.
one. Yeah, yeah. Symbolized by the star card in the tarot, and I can.
Sorry. Sorry about that.
No problem.
Mhm.
Um, I just grabbed my tarot deck, and I'll see if I can give you some pictures of that. So yeah, this is the star card, which
Okay.
let
Here,
me.
I'll put you on full screen. Go
There we are.
ahead.
Okay. Well, there we are. So yeah, so she is our beautiful maiden, our star, and she represents the age of Aquarius there.
Mm.
So,
And what was okay, so we just left the age of Pisces, correct?
uh-huh. Yeah.
And that
Yeah.
was a male age, is that
I,
correct?
I'm sorry. What that was what?
The Pisces age was a male age, is that
Yeah,
correct?
uh-huh. Yeah, that's kind of paternalism. That's represented by the devil card in the tarot.
Oh
Um,
God.
yeah, and it's a
Why would that
card
be?
of
Why would that be that way?
Because it's a card. Well, the devil card is, I'm looking for it to show you, but of course I got 78 cards in the tarot deck here, so didn't know we were going to talk about this, or I would have had them at the ready. So the devil, oh, here he is, our friend the devil. Right side up, we love the devil. I mean, he's not about being evil, but he is about materialism and
Oh,
and just about, you know, the stuff of life,
okay.
not about spirit, not about you know, any kind of love, you know, leaning into more lust and the sensual pleasures, things like that. That's what the devil represents. So so that's what we came out of, and then this is our transitional, this is our tower card here. So this is when I, you know, it looks terrifying, right? And that's where we are. So pardon my Halloween nails. So
Wow, that I mean, it does look frightening for
yeah,
sure.
yeah. But it goes into better times, happier times. So so you know, that's sort of, the tarot is the journey of life and the journey of societies and humankind, and you know, the micro and the macro. So just as I can read for an individual, you know, the Kabbalah tree of life, which the tarot is based upon, that reflects the journey of society, of the world.
Okay, that is so. It's also fascinating. I know you teach, you know, a couple of classes on this. It's very interesting to me. I want to kind of turn the interview towards um, your your fascination, your love, your journey with Miss Sylvia Plath.
Yeah, yeah.
That's
So
amazing. How did you get there?
well, when I was a teenager, I found her her novel, The Bell Jar,
Okay.
and read that, and you know, and I always sort of knew about her. I wouldn't say I was obsessed by her or anything as a teenager. That came later. That came in college, and and I started, and that's when I found her poetry, and that's when I really just got blown away. And then when I was in graduate school, getting my degree in my master's in creative writing, poetry and fiction. I write both poetry and fiction as Plath did,
Okay.
and I was seeing all these parallels with the tarot deck,
Okay.
and especially in this work, in her main book, Ariel.
Okay.
This book, I realized, was perfect alignment with the tarot, and so her first poem, Morning Song, fit with the Fool card, and then her poem Couriers perfectly fit with the Magician card, and you know, and the cards are numbered and in this way, and on and on. And I would see all this tarot imagery, and I brought it to the attention of my professor, and I said, I can't find anything on this. Hasn't anybody written about this before? And he's like, I don't know what you're talking about. And he said, why don't you make that your semester end project? And so what was my semester end project in 2007 became my life's work.
Oh,
and
wow.
and I just got deeper and deeper into the rabbit hole, and I realized no one had seen this. And not only were her poems aligned with the tarot, but to understand this just completely changes the way you read her work. Most people read Sylvia Plath's poetry as the work of an angry, suicidal poet. You know, she was considered one of the first feminists in poetry.
Okay. Okay.
And if you know anything about her story, she and her husband, Ted Hughes, here's a picture of them in 1956. They had sort of the storybook literary marriage. He's
Okay.
also a great poet. He is more famous in Britain on the UK side than she is. Uh, but um, but she's probably more famous now worldwide.
Right.
Ted Hughes was not faithful to Sylvia, and Sylvia had a lot of problems. She had a lot of emotional problems. She came from a shaky past. She had had a couple of suicide attempts before meeting him, and so when she fell in love big, and this was a big love, and this was he was kind of her teacher in many ways. He pushed her both in mysticism, which my book, The Magician's Girl, which will also be out next. I don't know for sure that it'll be next year, but I have a contract with Inner Traditions Publishing on that as well. Do not have my release date yet, but The Magician's Girl is about the mysticism of Sylvia Plath and Ted Hughes, her husband. And so he was very much, a guide for her, a mentor for her, both in poetry and mysticism. And together they got into, some, you might say, some dark stuff. I mean, there has been articles written. L. Alvarez, who was an editor, I believe, at the London Times, he has a famous article, "Did Black Magic Kill Sylvia Plath?" I think that's a little bit hyped up. I don't think she was doing black magic. But they were actively using Ouija boards. There's a picture in Letters Home here that her mother took of her holding the crystal ball. She was known to do, when especially when she got angry at her husband, she was doing these blazing witchy bonfires, and she was collecting his fingernail clippings and hair, and so she did get kind of on the dark side, but she was not mentally stable. And that's the heartbreaking thing. This was her life fell to pieces the year I was born in 1963. I guess it started to fall to pieces in 1962, to be correct. But she killed herself on February 11th, 1963. And, maybe because I was born 9 months later, I feel almost angry that that's how people identify her. She's the poet that people say, oh yeah, she put her head in the oven. Yeah, angry feminist. People say, oh, Plath, so angry, so depressive, so suicidal. She has the word suicidal in her poem Ariel. But if you know how to read the poem, it is talking about the bombings of Hiroshima and Nagasaki, and it's got all this World War II imagery through it. And of course, the Japanese had the kamikaze pilots who were suicidal, in her words, at one with the drive, into the red eye. You think of the Japanese flag; it's one big red eye. Nobody knows how to read this in the over 50 years since her death. So it's kind of heartbreaking, but I'm honored to speak about her today, especially because today would have been her 90th birthday. So yeah. October 27th is her birthday. And it's just become kind of my mission. And I can't tell you why I care so much. But I want to lift her out of this depressive, miserable mold. It's like, yeah, she killed herself. Yeah, she had some serious issues, but she was so much more than that. And she truly was a genius's genius. And this book, Ariel, she makes each poem do about 6 different jobs. So, in my book, my first book, which is this one, Fixed Stars Govern a Life, Decoding Sylvia Plath. I published this in 2013 with Stephen F. Austin State University Press. And I describe how there are different facets to each poem. So she has this one set of words works with alchemy. It works with astrology. It works with history, as I said, like the one about Hiroshima and Nagasaki. It works with the arts and humanities. It works with mythology. I mean, it's really mind-blowing, her mastery of words and the sextuple duty that she could get out of a set of words.
Mm-hmm.
When I began to see this, I mean, there were moments that I was weeping over the beauty of it. And
Wow.
so what's that?
I just said, wow, you were
Yeah.
weeping over the
Yeah,
beauty of it.
yeah. It's taken a lot out of me, academia. When I discovered this, I thought, oh wow, everyone's gonna flip out, everyone's gonna celebrate, they're gonna, boy, was I wrong.
Okay.
I have been persecuted. I mean, mainly as like the crazy tarot card reader, um, all my years of school and my MFA degree, it's not a PhD, so you like they
Right.
knock you down for that, and that it's very much a club, and academia is very cutthroat and very cliquish,
Uh-huh.
and I was not prepared to do the butt kissing that some people expected.
Mhm.
Um, and I'm a really outspoken person, and that is just how I am, and I make no apologies for it. And I wasn't going to pretend to go along and and agree with things I didn't. And so I've effectively been ostracized from the Plath community. Um, but the world is a lot bigger than the Plath community. I mean, it's probably a couple hundred people on Twitter.
You're a rebel in the Plath community. Give me, how is it that you parted ways with the
Oh,
Plath
well, I
community?
never really was accepted. I've done a lot of speaking, and I've published a lot, and I've been to some of the symposiums and done presentations, and I've met some nice people. I'm not saying they're all bad, not by a long stretch. But there was a leader, kind of a self-appointed. He used to like to refer to himself as the king of Plathdom,
Well,
and yeah, and his acolytes. And I'll just leave it at that. And everybody in the Plath world knows exactly who I'm talking about. But he came. He said to me once in an email. He said, "I think you're wrong." And I said, well, I hope that I'll be able to prove you right, prove myself right to you. But from that point on, yeah, he was he was quite nasty, and I wasn't going to be humiliated. I wasn't going to be insulted, and so I withdrew, and he withdrew, and there were, and then there were some nasty comments, and I'd hear through the grapevine, blah blah blah, just petty political stuff that
I see.
I really don't want to put my energy in. Didn't then, don't want to now. What I've learned is those people are not my friends, and they're not going to build me up.
Mhm.
And that's okay. That's not my path. For a long time, I tried to make it my path. For a long time, I really wanted their friendship and their validation. And since then, I've gone published a couple more books. These
Uh-huh.
are on individual poems that Plath wrote.
Let's get those
And
back up here. Let's get those
I,
back up here.
okay, so I have these are perhaps her two most famous poems, Daddy and Lady Lazarus. And so I try to give you an idea of the overall themes in the title, the subtitle, so Lady Lazarus, freedom's feminine fire. And there's a lot about the suffragettes and and women, women's liberation, the first generation of it.
Mhm.
And she juxtaposes it, as you can probably tell by the picture, with the Statue of Liberty, which
Uh-huh.
there's a really interesting story behind the Statue of Liberty, because she was a goddess, right, a female,
Mhm.
and as she was erected in parts, and Pleth talks about reducing the body to its parts, and she perfectly describes the Statue of Liberty throughout the poem. And but beyond that, there's the story of the suffragettes who were not allowed at the unveiling of the Statue of Liberty. And those brave women, they weren't allowed on Staten Island or, you know, on the land. So they got in boats and they had their little megaphones and they're like, she's a goddess, you know,
Wait, so the women were not allowed at the
women had very few rights, even in the 1920s.
Wait, I just want to be clear about this.
Women in America.
Women in America were not allowed to the
at the unveiling of the Statue of Liberty.
That is so bizarre.
Isn't that crazy? Sylvia Plath in the 1950s in her journals, she wrote that she wished she could walk in town at night without an escort. She couldn't do that without a male escort. That was the mid-1950s. You know, we don't realize how far we've come as females in society. I mean, we take everything for granted today. You and I can go anywhere we want at any time we want, but not so.
I think we might be frozen again. And I hope I'm not frozen. But what I want to say is you are listening in to another episode of Epic Understanding.
I'm back.
Welcome back. We are here with Julia Gordon-Bramer, and we are discussing Sylvia Plath, and we are talking about her journey as a poet, and her journey through mysticism,
and feminism.
and feminism. And I'm about to go down a subject, a lane that's very important to me, as well as to our channel, and that is adverse childhood experiences, because it seems that there had to be some kind of a generational effect when it came to
I lost you again.
That's okay. I was just talking to the audience about one of the missions that we often go down, the road we go down, and it is adverse childhood experiences. It blew me away. This circle of suicide that was created around Sylvia Plath, because she committed suicide, and then her husband remarried.
You did your homework.
Yeah. Her husband remarried. Then that wife committed suicide in the same exact way. She put her head in the oven. It is odd enough. It is strange enough for Sylvia Plath to have put her head in the oven, but for the next wife to have done the same thing was mind-blowing.
She was actually not his wife. They lived together as man and wife, and they had a child together.
So let me be clear. Sylvia Plath was not married to Hughes? I'll wait for you to come back, because I'm very curious about this. Okay, so I'm checking in. Was Sylvia Plath married to Hughes?
Yes, she was married to Ted Hughes. Yeah, they were
then married. The gentleman. So I'm sorry. Then the woman that took over raising her child was not.
Her name was Asha Wevel. Sylvia Plath had 2 children with Ted Hughes. She had her daughter Frida first, and then the son Nicholas. And after Plath died by suicide, then he had been having an affair with this woman Asha Wevel, who left her husband for him, and they had a very tumultuous number of years together. They had a little daughter named Shura together, and then so Asha, in a lot of pain. You know, I think Ted Hughes had a knack for being attracted to these very beautiful, artistic, disturbed women. You know, and he was not kind to Asha, and he was not faithful to Asha either. So he really pushed them both to the brink. But at the
such an odd
time,
way. Such
what's
an odd way. It's very
yeah.
specific. You know, one woman puts her head in the oven,
Mhm.
and another woman also puts her head in the oven.
So that was actually the most common way of suicide at that time. And there's Malcolm Gladwell wrote a book. I can't remember the name of it. It's one of his more recent books that he talks about Plath's suicide, and that at the time that we had this particular kind of, they called it town gas, that went into the home ovens. That was the popular way of suicide was much higher at that time when that was the way to go. Because
Maybe
it
because
was,
did you just go to sleep? Is that what it
yeah,
was?
essentially, yeah. And so it was less gruesome. You weren't leaving this horrible mess of blood like you might with the gun.
I see. I see. Okay, so it would be akin to going into the car and just kind of going to sleep, maybe like carbon monoxide part poisoning, something of that effect, I suppose.
Okay.
And so I can just say, I was just telling the audience, maybe it will be like people put themselves in a car.
Yeah,
Into
yeah. And that's changed too, because that was also becoming an easier way for people to die. And they've
Mhm.
since changed cars, with the emissions, and that you can't just put a hose from your tailpipe into the car anymore. I mean, you can, but it doesn't have the same effect that it used to.
Wow, wow. But to get to, okay, so there's one and then there's two and then there's a third. Nicholas,
Nicholas, yeah, their son.
their
Yeah, and
son.
that was not too long ago. It was 2008, maybe. It was after his father died. And I think he probably fought depression for a long, long time and
Mhm.
waited till his father, was gone. And yeah, just heartbreaking. They had other suicides in their family. A grandparent or a great grandparent had died by suicide also. So yeah, it was. There's probably something biological there. She probably had bipolar. Maybe Nicholas had bipolar. Maybe Asha did also. I don't know.
I mean, perhaps, but at the same time, you know, adverse childhood experiences, I know that once one person commits suicide in your life, it becomes a easier solution to make. Like it's
Yeah,
generational.
yeah. It's almost like you have permission, like somebody else did it, and yeah, yeah.
Mhm,
And it looks like a way out of the pain.
mhm, mhm. And so it just very much feels like a generational curse. And I just wanted to talk about, this idea is suicide contagious because it was so much um,
Speaking of the
suicide.
pain, this
Yes, yes, yes. That's okay. We're kind of keep going. It's going to be fine. Um, it, it just seemed to surround that family to your point that there was even more suicide throughout that family. So
yeah,
particularly heart
yeah.
wrenching,
A
you
lot of
know?
brilliance in their family too. I mean, the one thing we didn't talk about that also was very, very hard on Sylvia Plath was that when she was 8, her father died. He had diabetes, but he didn't know it and he didn't get treated, and he stubbed his toe and it ended up becoming gangrenous, and
Mm,
he lost his whole leg, and he ended up dying from it. And it would have been a very simple thing for them to treat if he'd just gone to the doctor. But
mm,
he waited too late, and he was a brilliant, brilliant man. He was a professor at Boston U, and her mother was also brilliant and also a professor. And her mother doesn't get the credit that she's due. And my friend Catherine Rankovic studies Aurelia Plath, Sylvia Plath's mother, and has a wonderful blog on it, studying Aurelia Plath. If any Plath scholars are interested, because it's just another facet to Plath's life. Nobody is one dimensional. And we're all the sum of our families, and we're all influenced by so many different things. And to just say a person is this way, somebody wrote on Twitter, they were surprised by a picture that
Okay, so she's, we're just having another one of those episodes where her system is going in and out, but that's okay because I am dying to ask her about the brilliance of
I'm
Sylvia Plath. And I'm curious, you talk about the idea that brilliance ran in her family, and then I asked the audience the question prior to our interview, was depression part of Sylvia's brilliance? You
Oh,
know,
I think definitely. What I was going to say, somebody on Twitter said something about how she looked like she had a sense of humor, and she was wickedly funny. You know,
okay.
that's the thing, that until you read her letters and her journals, you don't know how funny she was.
Mm-hmm.
And this is the stuff that people miss because they just think suicide, and depression. But she was a very, intense, complicated woman. And she died at 30 years old, but she had lived and achieved a lot. And I tend to think of her as kind of like one of Jack Kerouac's, what he called Roman candles that just burn out fast, with
I
the
see.
the Vincent van Goghs and maybe the Kurt Cobains, that.
Uh-huh. So you would compare her to one of the great artists um, that live fiercely and then leave
Yeah.
a beautiful young corpse. Is
Yeah,
how?
yeah. She sure didn't live long enough to get any, wrinkles or anything to complain
No.
about there. She never saw menopause.
Never saw
Yeah.
menopause, but did manage to have two children.
Mhm.
You know, just digging into her life a little bit, um, kind of makes you clutch your pearls.
Yeah.
Quite, yeah,
Oh,
quite,
we're so blessed to be in this generation because, I mean, just with modern medicine and psychiatry, I mean, when she first had her severe depression, they went to electric shock therapy. And
exactly. Yeah, so it's still thought to be effective, and I was surprised about that. And I wondered when you come back, I'm going to ask you what your thoughts were on this electric shock therapy. Did you think that it was a good idea that she had electric shock therapy, or do you think that it actually contributed to her demise?
I think it sure didn't help. She had a few rounds of it, and the first batch was done very badly,
I see.
and it caused her a lot of physical pain.
Hmm.
And then she got a better doctor who administered it in a way that was much more gentle. And I think they gave her a sedative or something that they didn't do the first time. And so it was not traumatic, and it did seem to help her, interestingly. But yeah, she's written about the electric shock as well, both in poetry and in journaling, and it was, I mean, what we know about it today, it can help and it can cause brain damage.
Right.
And whether it, there's no, that her brain is not able to be studied, in this
Hmm.
day and age. Um, it would be interesting to know. I've read so many books about her, and some people think she might have had a kind of temporal lobe epilepsy. And a lot of people consider that she was manic depressive. And a lot of people consider, some people have given her the label schizophrenic. I think absolutely she was bipolar.
Yeah.
But I kind of, I don't think that schizophrenic fits it, not in my understanding of schizophrenia.
I mean, I'm by no means an expert, but by looking at her life, there's no evidence that,
Right.
schizophrenia would be a fair diagnosis
Yeah.
for her. That
Yeah.
said, I because of her having, electroshock therapy, I went and read up about it, and I was surprised that it is still in use today. Like it is still thought of as reasonable um, to treat someone with that, and perhaps it's a good idea to do that. I just thought I was like, wow, that is very very interesting to say the least. But even in her very short life, dying at 30 years old, committing suicide, um, having a um, I don't want to say a difficult childhood, but having her father die
Mhm.
very young and having serious depression throughout her life, she still managed to receive a Pulitzer Prize.
Yeah. Well, that was posthumous.
Ultimately, but
Yeah,
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 but still.
and the bell jar here. This work, it's very autobiographical, but it is considered a work of fiction. And she changed, she took liberties with her true story, and it's but it's very close to her story. And that is also, it continues to be one of the best-selling novels ever, since it came out. When it in her life, she didn't really see the success. It sort of had a quiet little release and couple mediocre reviews. It wasn't until she died that her work really got noticed, which is real tragic, because I think she was very much a perfectionist. She was very much an overachiever, and she wanted the fame. And
Okay.
she she was really,
Okay.
but she didn't really see it in her lifetime.
Hmm. What made her work catch on? Like, who discovered her work? What
Oh,
was the fire about?
I mean, she was successful even as a teenager. She was getting published in Mademoiselle magazine and 17
Mhm.
magazine. She was writing stories, and she won a Fulbright grant to go to Cambridge University in England, which was where she met Ted Hughes. And she had a lot of achievement and a lot of success, but not this kind of world renown, making her a historical figure.
Mhm.
Um, so, she was, when she was married to Ted Hughes, she was getting published in the New Yorker and in Poetry Magazine, and getting some very impressive credentials even then. But it's the aerial poems that really broke her through into something that had never been done before. The strongest, most powerful female voice maybe ever. And, um,
Is
and,
she
you know,
quoted a lot in feminine history? Is she quoted a lot?
Oh yeah, yeah. I mean, she's considered probably the contemporary American female poet next to Emily Dickinson.
I see.
So is she is a writer's writer. I mean, she is the best of the best, and truly just genius beyond what most people realize.
Mhm.
Um, but yeah, she sadly didn't get to see that kind of validation and acclaim. I
Mm.
believe her energy sees it now.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Now, I'll tell you what I find interesting. Sylvia Plath was um, into tarot cards and Ouija board and astrology and all of these things. And you are certainly into tarot cards and energy, and you welcome the ideas of astrology. But yet, the Plath community is frustrated with this connection, this idea that you're bringing to the table. Why is
Well,
this?
Sylvia Plath wrote and called herself many times an atheist.
Hmm.
And I never disputed that, but
Hmm.
she was the most spiritual atheist you ever wanted to find. I
I
mean,
see.
she she was utterly fascinated with spirituality, religion, the occult, mysticism. She would, she would read books on Saint Teresa and on the Buddha, and study all kinds of religion. Henry James' Varieties of Religious Experience. There's just loads and loads of books in her personal library, many of which I've gone into the Plath archives and opened up her actual books and looked at her underlinings and her margin notes and that sort of thing. And, she was obsessed by God, even if she didn't believe that God was a man in the clouds. She was obsessed by spirit.
Okay.
And that's when some people might say the darker side sometimes too. But, people have written about that it was always her trying to chase back to connect with her father. Perhaps there might be some truth to that. But yeah, there's a lot of evidence that she and Ted Hughes, through their poetry, were purposely trying to cast spells to make their work, more resonant, which I believe they succeeded at. As I said, her work does sextuple duty, getting into all these different meanings that speak on this very core level, that even if you don't fully understand it, you feel it. It's really quite a feat, and they both did it. And I've studied his work too, and I haven't mapped out all of his work in the way that I have Plath's work, but certainly he was doing the same thing. I do believe Sylvia, in her perfectionistic way, was a little more meticulous and more true to form and structure of Kabbalah, and I talk about that in my book. But Hughes was definitely mirroring his in the same kind of structure and everything. And I've written some on that, and probably will write more on it in the future.
So, was her husband an atheist as well?
I haven't read. It's not coming to the top of my mind that he ever declared that in the same way. He was, anybody who knew him knew that he was deeply spiritual and obsessed by the occult, especially. And he was into darker energies.
When you say the occult, what does that mean? I don't know what you mean by that.
I mean, he wanted spiritual power. He wanted to cast spells. She was more philosophical about it. She wanted some of that too, I think. But yeah, his energy was just a little darker, a little more selfish, I would say. I think Sylvia Plath wanted to write work that would change the world. And he wanted that and then some. And he got it. He was quite powerful. There's a lot of stories. I've in my book, my forthcoming book, The Magician's Girl, I have the stories of how Plath developed in her mysticism within her family, because there was her mother studied the famous alchemist Paracelsus, and she went to this Unitarian school where they studied zodiac and Sunday school, and she had all of these kind of weird little influences that were not the typical, I don't think, American education. Meanwhile, Ted Hughes grew up with his mythology, and his mother telling him the ghost stories. I should say his psychic mother telling him the ghost. And then they come together, and I talk about their mysticism together in the book. And then I have a section after Plath where Hughes's story continues with the rest of. He had girlfriends who were practicing, spells with him, and he would find their hair tied to his doorknobs. They were trying to keep him, basically. He always had another girl on the side. he was a really good looking guy, by the way. And so he always had a woman or two or three or four.
Wow. Wow. And do you think that it was his brilliance or his good looks?
Oh, I think it was both.
Mhm.
He was the total package. I mean, he was a hunk. He was, well over 6 feet.
Put that picture back up. Let me see if I think he's such a
Yeah.
hunk.
So there he
I
is.
don't know. I think she outdoes him in the looks department, but that's
Yeah.
just
Oh,
me.
she's beautiful too. And you should see her blonde era. I don't have pictures handy of that, but yeah, she had her platinum summer in 1954. Stunning, just she was a gorgeous girl. They were both gorgeous, and that's why Hollywood grabbed onto them. And I believe it was 2008, Gwyneth Paltrow starred in a movie called Sylvia about their story, and Daniel Craig was Ted Hughes. And I thought they did a good job, except it was all about the drama and not about the great work that they did. That's what kills me. Everyone just wants to hang on to, let's talk about the suicide, let's talk about her misery, and there was just so much more.
You know what? She was a fascinating woman. I want to talk about Nicholas's work a little bit because he was a wonderful poet in his own right.
Nicholas, no,
Well, at least that's what I read. That
Frida, the daughter, she's written poetry and she is an artist. But
mm,
oops, that looks like a lost you.
I'm not sure if I'm okay. I think she's coming back.
I'm back.
So what I read about Nicholas's work, um,
To
what
my knowledge, Nicholas never wrote poetry
I
or fiction. But Frida has written many books of poetry,
okay,
and she's an artist, and so you might have just got them switched around. And of course, Ted is a great poet,
right.
and internationally famous.
Absolutely, absolutely. Um, and that's magnificent. That is absolutely magnificent. But tell me more about the daughter.
Daughter Frida, I'm not sure what there is to tell. I mean, she's written many books of poetry. She's a very, very accomplished painter. She's currently been selling off objects belonging to her mother. She recently auctioned off Plath's tarot cards, which sold for $207,000. Um, uh, there's she's had a rough time. She was closer to her father than her mother because I think she's written about that. She's had some bad feelings about her mother because her mother chose to die and leave her and her brother when they were just babies. So, I can't really speak much more beyond that about Frida. Don't know her.
Okay, well, you know what? Fair enough. I do think that your offspring certainly say a bit about you know, your life. And I was curious about the generational effect on her since she is, her only living child. Um, what that might be like because like I told you, we often go down the route of adverse childhood experiences here, and you've spoken to that to some extent, because there's some frustration there with the daughter, with her mother committing suicide and leaving them as just children. Are you there with me? Okay, I think you just went in and out,
I
but
missed your last question.
I was just saying there was some frustration with that's okay. Oh, I think, are you about to go out again? I think you are because I can kind of see you for a second and then poof, you're gone. Well, this will be my last question when you get back, and then we'll go ahead and we'll wrap up our journey after this very last question. And it was the daughter's frustration with her mother. Um, you know, has she spoken about that, or
Oh,
um,
she's written quite a lot of it in poetry mainly. Yeah.
I see. I
And
see.
in introductions to various collections, and yeah.
Amazing, amazing. Um, oh, one more. Do you think Sylvia Plath hated men? Do you think she did? I got to get that question out. I got to get her answer. And honestly, I don't think Sylvia hated men. But sometimes when a woman is a feminist, um, that idea comes across. So, do you think Sylvia hated men?
Not at all. No, I think she loved men. She's had a lot of lovers. That was another thing she wrote about, in her journals. And yeah, she collected boyfriends before Ted Hughes, and there's no way. I mean, and she loved Ted Hughes so completely, maybe too much, and
Mm,
and at the expense of her sanity, really. Yeah.
mhm. How interesting. We obviously could talk about Sylvia and her life for so much longer. We could really continue to go down this road, but it is time for us to kind of wrap up. And I would suggest that you look up Julia Gordon-Bramer and look at buying her books. She has a brand new book coming out soon. Julia, where can they find you?
You can find me at juliagordonbramer.com, and no hyphen there, JuliaGordonBramer.com. People can call me up if you want a tarot card reading or something. 314-517-0158. I have no qualms giving my number out. I turn my phone off at a certain time at night. So, but yeah, I would love to, if anyone wants to, they can find me, my email through the website. And if they want to write me, if they want to call me, if they want to talk Sylvia sometime, it's one of my favorite subjects. So yeah.
Awesome. And then let's just put it out there. Even though you don't really embrace this name, CBS has called you the best. What is that word? Not psychic, but fortune teller. That's the phrase they use. They have called you America's best or the world's best fortune teller. Uh, so even though you don't embrace the term fortune teller, because you really use tarot cards, but that's CBS and their marketing. So there you go.
Yeah. It's tarot is about personal growth more than fortune telling, and so I'm just talking more about where someone's energy goes, and I'd love to give anyone a reading if they were interested in that.
Amazing. So she is world renowned at her job, and I'm going to keep her just a few more minutes. But, ladies and gentlemen, I think we've had a wonderful time here tonight, despite a few of the technical difficulties. It doesn't even matter because we got it all out. I just thank you so much for tuning in, and it is a blessing for you to spend this time with me. But for now, I'll simply say bye-bye for now. Thank you for watching. You're winning. You're winning. You're winning.